The Missouri wind had a way of finding the cracks in everything: door frames, boots, bones. It slid through the bare trees of the dying orchard where Clara Winters stood, sleeves rolled up to her elbows, fingers stiff with cold as she chopped wood with rhythmic stubbornness. The axe struck the log with dull thumps, but the pile never seemed to grow. Behind her, the farmhouse stood gray and hunched like an old dog left out in the rain, its chimney giving off smoke that smelled more of desperation than warmth. Inside, May scrubbed the stove with lye soap and cold water, her hands raw. She didn't speak as Liddy, the youngest, stood at the window, watching a blackbird pick at something in the snow. She wiped her nose on her sleeve. "Let her come yet?" Liddy asked, not turning her head. May didn't answer. She had learned lately that talking stirred up more hunger than quiet did. Clara came in with the cold and the smell of sweat. She hung her coat on the nail by the door, eyes heavy under her brow. "Nothing at the post again," she said, voice flat. "Not even from Cousin Ruth." Silence again. May stood. "We'll never last another winter on dried apples and good intentions." Clara nodded once, slow. "Then we don't winter here." The next morning, Clara sat at the kitchen table with the lamp lit low. Her handwriting was neat, careful. She wrote 3 letters, one for herself, and one each for her sisters. To men in Kansas, Nebraska, and Wyoming. Each letter a plea dressed up like a proposal. Liddy didn't understand why they had to lie. "We're not lying," Clara said, folding the envelopes. "We're just not advertising the truth." The truth was, they had nothing to bring. No dowry. No land. No name that held weight. The replies came faster than expected. 3 men, one for each sister. Each promising travel fare, a warm hearth, and the kind of life the Winters girls had only seen in catalog drawings. They left 2 weeks later. Sold what was left of the orchard tools for train fare and wore their Sunday dresses under threadbare coats. Clara's suitor met her in Abilene. A black-hatted man with wax boots and the kind of smile that looked permanent until it wasn't. He looked her over, nodded once. "Did you bring a trunk?" "No, sir. Just what I've got on me." He paused. "No linens? No silver? No family ties? I've got strong arms and a sober mind." He tipped his hat without another word and walked off. May lasted one supper with her intended. A rancher with red cheeks and rough manners. He said grace with his hat on and never looked her in the eye. Afterward, he pushed his plate away. "I figured you'd at least bring a cow or some seed money. Maybe a quilt. Something." May swallowed hard. "I brought myself." He laughed. "That's what poor women always say." Liddy's man never showed at the station. She waited from noon to sundown, then walked to the boarding house barefoot because the soles of her shoes had come off. They reunited in Rockridge. The town was nothing more than a crossroads with a church, a general store, and a saloon with crooked shutters. They rented a room above the bakery with the last of their coins. Ate dry biscuits and hot water steeped with cinnamon bark. Liddy cried the first night. May didn't say anything for 2 whole days. Clara stared out the window, her jaw clenched until it hurt. "I reckon we're too plain," Liddy said finally, kneading the hem of her dress. "We're not plain," Clara answered, not looking at her. "We're poor. That's all. And poor's worse," May added. They might have turned back if there'd been anything left to go back to. On the 4th day, Clara took a job scrubbing pans at the saloon. May stitched shirts for the dry goods store. Liddy swept church floors in silence. They didn't complain, but the town noticed. Women with no men, no land, no plans, folks called them spinsters in the making. Then, one morning, the sound of hooves pulled every gaze to the street. 3 men rode in, quiet, dusty, and weather-bitten. They weren't loud or smiling. Their presence didn't announce itself. It settled like smoke. The tallest dismounted first. Broad-shouldered, eyes like storm clouds, he handed his reins to the second man, a lanky fellow with a bad limp and a face too young for such tired eyes. The third didn't dismount. He lit a cigarette and stayed on his horse, silent as a stone. They weren't dressed like cowhands. Their coats were patched but clean. Their boots scuffed but well kept. The horses were healthy. And they rode like they weren't in a hurry, but they always got where they meant to go. Someone at the saloon whispered, "Baron boys back from the dead. Samuel, Eli, and Tobias Barron. Sons of old Jacob Barron, the man who built a ranch up in Cold Hollow, then vanished into his land like it swallowed him whole. The rumors were simple. Jacob died last spring. The land passed to the sons. Now they were back to claim what was theirs." Clara passed them on the boardwalk later that day. Samuel stepped aside to let her pass. She nodded once. He touched the brim of his hat in return. No one said a word. That night, Clara lay awake listening to the wind scrape the windows. May rolled over and muttered, "You see how they looked at folks? Like they weren't surprised by anything." Clara replied, "They didn't look at us like the others did." "No. They didn't." And that was enough to stir something, for the first time in a long time, not hope. Not yet. But the memory of it. The first sign of the Barons wasn't the sound of hooves or dust on the road. It was the way the saloon piano stopped mid-note. Conversations faded like a curtain drawing closed. Then came the clink of spurs on wood and the groan of saddle leather. 3 men on horseback entered Rockridge like they weren't arriving but returning, though no one had seen them in years. Samuel rode front, straight-backed, wearing a coat that had been mended more times than replaced. His eyes passed over the storefronts like he was measuring them, not admiring. Eli followed at his side, one boot resting awkwardly in the stirrup, his limp slowing the mule he led. His hat was pulled low, a shadow swallowing the left side of his face. Tobias trailed them by a pace, smoking and watching everything through a veil of silence. His coat collar was turned up high, and he never touched the reins with both hands at once. They tied up at the hitching post outside the land office. Samuel swung down with a grunt, winced as his boot hit the dirt, then helped Eli dismount without asking. Tobias stayed mounted, arms crossed, the cigarette burning low between 2 fingers. Inside, the land clerk looked up and straightened. "Didn't think we'd see Barons again this side of planting season," Samuel answered flat. "Didn't think we'd have to come back at all." The deed was transferred without fuss. Their father's ranch, what was left of it, officially belonged to them now. Cold Hollow. A stretch of wild land where fences blew down more than they stayed up and rivers carved through clay like knives. Out on the boardwalk, Clara passed by, carrying a basket of washed linens. Samuel stepped aside, nodding once. She didn't smile, but she looked at him longer than most would have. That was enough. Liddy saw Tobias first outside the store, one boot resting against the wall as he smoked. He watched the sky more than the people, until Liddy dropped her bag of flour. He didn't move to help, but his eyes flicked to hers. She picked it up herself, met his gaze just long enough to feel the weight behind it. Later that day, Samuel approached Clara near the bakery. His tone was measured. "I've got land up north. Need hands to get it running before frost sets in." Clara studied him, eyes narrowing. "You need labor," she said. "I need people who don't break easy. I've got 2 sisters who've never had the luxury." He nodded once. "You'd have a roof. Meals. Split of the crops when they come. No promises? None that'd be worth anything." She looked over her shoulder toward the room above the bakery, where May and Liddy waited for news. Then back at him. "We'll leave by morning." The wagon they used was old, its wheels squealing like injured things, but it held. The sisters rode with the few belongings they had: quilts, a Bible, a dented skillet. Samuel drove. Eli rode beside him, staring ahead like he was already somewhere else. Tobias followed behind, alone on horseback. They didn't talk much. The prairie didn't encourage it. Wind spoke louder than words, and the road north to Cold Hollow was long, lined with brittle grass and fence posts leaning like old men in the sun. May watched Eli from the back of the wagon. His limp wasn't dramatic, but it slowed everything he did. She caught him adjusting his boot, grimacing, then pretending he hadn't. She said nothing. He didn't look back. At night, they camped under stars sharp enough to pierce skin. Liddy built the fire. Tobias watched in silence, flipping a silver coin in his palm. Clara cooked what beans they had and passed the tin plates without a word. When the fire burned low, Samuel sat with his back to a stump and said, "This place, it's not a farm yet. It's barely land. We weren't promised anything finished," Clara replied. "Good. It won't be." Cold Hollow was colder than the name suggested. The land stretched wide and empty, bordered by ridgelines and thin trees. The main house had collapsed in on itself years ago. Only the barn stood tall, roof patched with tin, walls creaking in the wind. There was no orchard, no garden, just dirt and promise. The sisters moved in without fuss. May cleared out a corner of the barn for sleeping. Liddy unpacked the quilts and started making lists out loud: water, firewood, something to fix the chicken coop. Clara helped Samuel lift the rusted plow out of the shed. He didn't say thank you. She didn't expect him to. That night Samuel stood by the fence, staring out into the nothing. Clara walked up beside him, arms folded. "You expecting something to grow out there by staring at it?" He didn't answer right away. "My father used to walk this ridge line. Said a man could see his whole future if he stood still long enough." She didn't laugh. Just said, "Then he probably never planted anything." He turned to look at her. "You always this direct?" "Only when I'm tired." "I like that." She didn't reply. But she stayed beside him until the cold bit too deep, and they both went inside without another word. The next few days passed in labor. Eli worked the fence lines, slow but steady. May watched him limp the length of a pasture, never asking for help, never resting long. When she finally approached him with a wrapped bandage, he looked at her like she'd offered him gold. "You know how to wrap a leg, do you?" he asked. "My father limped before he passed. We didn't have a doctor." He nodded once, then sat on the porch step. She knelt beside him, wordless. Tobias spent his time in the barn, quiet as a shadow. Liddy caught him hammering new boards into the walls, jaw tight, sweat lining his neck. She leaned against the doorway. "You don't talk much." He didn't stop hammering. "I've got nothing worth saying." "That's not the same as not saying it." He looked up at her, eyes dark and steady. "You one of them girls who thinks you can fix a broken man?" She smirked. "No. I'm one of them girls who knows broken when she sees it." He went back to hammering. "You gonna help or just watch?" She rolled up her sleeves and stepped inside. By the end of the week, fences stood taller, the barn roof didn't leak, and there was meat smoking over the fire. Nothing had been promised. Nothing had been said. But something had started to settle between them. Not love. Not yet. But the quiet understanding that comes when hard work replaces hope, and people begin to trust what their hands can build. They weren't family yet. But they were no longer strangers. And that, for now, was enough. The morning frost hadn't yet lifted when Samuel stood outside the barn, staring down a fence post that leaned like it had something to confess. He didn't speak when Clara passed him a hammer. Just took it, set his jaw, and drove the nail in slow, steady swings that echoed across the empty pasture. She didn't linger. Didn't ask what needed fixing next. She just moved on to the next post. By midday, May was elbow-deep in flour, her sleeves rolled high, and her expression flat. Eli sat on the porch steps with his boot off, massaging his swollen knee. She didn't ask permission. Just brought the basin over and set it beside him. "Notice you haven't been walking right since we started clearing brush," she said. "I don't walk right since Antietam. Still walking, though. That's the goal," he muttered, glancing at her. "You always this blunt?" "I don't waste words. They don't grow back like corn." Eli smiled barely. But he let her lift his leg, and when she pressed the warm cloth to the joint, he didn't flinch. Liddy, hammer in hand, watched Tobias from across the yard. He was splitting logs with the kind of fury that came from something older than anger. She stepped up beside him without asking. "You trying to kill the wood or just hate it that much?" He didn't stop swinging. "Wood don't talk back." Neither do I, most days. But I still get stared at like I might bite. He paused, looked at her. You come here to help or to be clever? I came because we got work. Not because anyone invited me. He set the axe down, breathing hard. Then do it. They worked side by side without another word, sweat mingling with the cold air. When Liddy nicked her thumb on a splinter, Tobias handed her a rag, silent. She wrapped it without complaint. That night, around the fire, the six of them shared stew and silence. No one prayed. No one asked about the past. But eyes met across the flames and lingered a little longer than before. Samuel passed Clara the last piece of cornbread. She hesitated. You sure? I didn't earn it. She took it. We all did. Eli leaned against the porch post later, pipe between his lips, watching May gather scraps into a tin for the hens. You cook like someone who's fed too many mouths before, he said. I have. Big family? No. Just hungry. Eli took a long pull from the pipe. You ever wonder if this, he gestured at the barn, the fields, the raw wild land, is going to work? She looked at the stars, then back at him. No. I don't wonder. I just do the next thing. That's the only reason I'm still breathing. You think breathing's enough? No. But it's where you start. In the barn, Tobias sat with his back against a stack of hay, nursing a bottle he didn't offer to share. Liddy leaned in the doorway, arms crossed. You always drink when you're tired or just when it's quiet? He didn't look at her. I drink when I remember things I don't want to. She stepped inside, took a seat beside him. You remember 'em better or worse when you're drunk? He turned the bottle in his hands. They change shape. Don't get softer, though. Liddy didn't speak after that. Just leaned back and stared at the rafters until the bottle was empty, and he set it down gently, like it was something fragile. Outside, Clara found Samuel tightening the wagon harness in the dark, lantern flickering low beside him. You could do that in the morning. I could. You don't sleep much. I don't sit still well. She leaned against the wheel, watching him work. You expect us to stay? No. Then why ask us to come? Didn't ask? Offered. And if we decide to go? He straightened, looked at her. Then I won't stop you. She held his gaze. We're not waiting to be saved, Samuel. I'm not here to save anyone. Good. But I don't want to do this alone. Clara didn't answer. But she didn't walk away either. The days stretched, one into the next, marked by labor and the kind of silence that wasn't cold but careful. The sisters learned the land by feel, where the soil was soft enough to turn, where the creek bit deepest in spring. The brothers worked beside them, not ahead or behind, but shoulder to shoulder. Nobody asked for more than was given, but when hands blistered or backs ached, someone always showed up with a bucket of water or a wordless nod. Trust came slow, not like a wave, but like a trickle from a thawing rock face. You noticed it only after it soaked in. One morning, May found a scarf folded on her cot. Hers had torn the day before. It was stitched with quiet care. She said nothing but caught Eli's eye at breakfast and nodded once. He didn't nod back, but he didn't look away. Tobias stopped drinking during the day. No one mentioned it. Liddy left a jar of mint tea near his cot. The next night, it was empty. Samuel handed Clara a parcel after supper. What's this? Seed. Winter wheat. It's late in the season. Not too late. She opened it, looked at him. You think we'll be here come spring? I think we're already here. She smiled, not soft, not wide. Just enough. And that night, no one said it, but the house didn't feel like a place being borrowed. It felt, in some quiet, unspoken way, like the start of something being built. The first snow came like a thief, early and without warning. It blanketed the ridge by morning, soft and silent, but underneath it the ground stayed hard as iron. Clara stood at the barn door with her arms crossed, watching flakes gather on the fence rail. Samuel passed behind her, dragging a sack of feed across the frozen ground. Neither of them said anything. They didn't need to. The silence had changed. It wasn't the kind that sat between strangers anymore. By midday, the cold had crept into every crack of the cabin. Liddy wrapped another quilt around her shoulders and leaned close to the stove, feeding it a stick at a time like it owed her something. May worked by the window, stitching up a tear in Eli's coat. Her fingers were red, and the thread snapped more than once, but she never stopped. Outside, the snow deepened. Eli hadn't come back from checking the livestock pens. Tobias had gone after him just before dark, saying nothing, but taking the rifle with him. Clara pulled on her boots without asking. Samuel blocked the door with one hand. "They'll be back." "You don't know that." "I know you'll freeze looking." She stepped back, jaw tight. "And what if they don't come back?" Samuel stared at her, the kind of stare that didn't ask for understanding, only patience. "They will." An hour passed. Then another. May poured hot water into a tin cup and left it by the stove. Her eyes didn't leave the door. Liddy paced, muttering under her breath about people who didn't know when to come in out of the cold. The door finally creaked open with a gust of wind that made the flame in the lamp flicker. Tobias stepped in, soaked to the waist, dragging Eli behind him. The younger brother's coat was crusted in snow, one sleeve torn, the leg beneath it bloodied and stiff. "Horse went through the creek ice," Tobias said. Eli fell trying to pull it out. Clara helped pull him to the floor near the fire. May was already boiling water, her hands shaking only slightly. Samuel cut the trouser leg with a hunting knife, the blade clean and quick. The skin beneath was purple and swollen. Eli winced once, then went silent. "He needs rest," May said. "And that leg needs heat." Clara moved to the stove, stoking the flame, while Liddy dragged over another quilt. Tobias stood back, arms folded tight, jaw clenched. "I should have pulled him out faster." "You pulled him out," Clara said. "That's what matters." He didn't answer. The next day, the storm stayed. The wind screamed like something alive, and snow climbed the walls outside the cabin. Inside, the air grew stale, smoke curling from the stove pipe that struggled to stay open. Eli drifted in and out of sleep. When he was awake, his jaw stayed clenched like he was keeping pain between his teeth. May barely left his side. She wiped sweat from his brow, spooned broth into his mouth, whispered things he didn't respond to but must have heard. Once, when she thought no one was watching, she brushed his hair back and kissed his temple. Liddy found Tobias out by the barn, chopping firewood with wet gloves and a soaked shirt. She stood a few feet off and waited until he noticed. "You trying to freeze on purpose?" He kept chopping. "Better cold than still. You think beating up that stump makes you useful? It keeps me from drinking." She watched him, her voice lower now. "You're not the only one afraid." He paused, axe held midair. The wind pressed against them both like a wall. "I ain't afraid," he said. Liddy stepped closer. "Then you're lying." He looked at her, and for the first time, didn't flinch. Back in the cabin, Clara found Samuel kneeling near the fire, feeding kindling in quiet, even motions. "This storm's testing us," she said. He didn't look up. "Storms don't test. They reveal." "And what's this one revealing?" He set the stick down, finally met her eyes. "That we need each other more than we wanted to admit." Clara pulled her shawl tighter. "We're not here to be rescued. Neither are we." For a long while, the only sound was the hiss of the wood catching flame. That night, Eli opened his eyes and found May asleep in the chair beside him, her hands still wrapped around his. He stared at her, lips parted like he wanted to speak but hadn't yet found the right words. He squeezed her hand. She woke, smiled without surprise, and whispered, "You came back." "I tried to," he rasped. "You did. That's all that matters." By the third day, the storm broke. The sky lightened to a dull gray, and the wind quieted to a low moan. Snow still blanketed the ground, but the air held a sharpness that meant the worst had passed. The sisters stepped outside, their boots crunching over ice. The world was still, wrapped in white. Smoke drifted from the chimney like a sigh. Tobias came up behind Liddy and handed her a piece of firewood, already split. "Could have done that yourself," he said. She took it, tucking it under her arm. "But it means more coming from you." Samuel stood on the porch, watching the road. "Won't be much left of winter now," he said. Clara joined him, arms crossed, watching the horizon. "Won't be much left of us if it had gone on longer. But we're still standing. For now." He looked at her sideways. "That's enough, isn't it?" She didn't answer with words. Just stayed beside him, the wind tugging at her skirt, both of them looking out at the same hard, empty road. In that moment, there were no grand promises. No declarations. Just the weight of shared survival, and a quiet knowing that something had shifted, not everything, not all at once, but enough. The first time Haldane rode onto the property, no one needed to be told who he was. His coat was too clean, his horse too polished, and the smile he wore said he wasn't there for conversation. He stopped just shy of the fence line, where Samuel was setting a post, hands muddy to the wrists. "Baron," Kane said, tapping the brim of his hat like a man mocking courtesy. "Heard the old place had new life." Samuel didn't stand. Just kept hammering the post into frozen soil. Kane continued, voice smooth. "Didn't expect to see you back up here. Thought this land had swallowed your father whole." "Maybe it did," Samuel said, not looking up. Kane leaned forward in his saddle. "Trouble is, your line's cut real close to mine now. And I've got cattle needing space." "You've got space," Samuel said. "Just not mine." Kane grinned, then turned his horse with a flick of the reins. "Boundaries are funny things out here. Wind shifts, posts rot, maps blur. Be a shame if you staked your whole life on the wrong side of a line." The snow hadn't fully melted by the time the first fence was cut. One morning it stood. That night it didn't. Samuel didn't need to ask who done it. The wire was coiled neatly and left hanging on a post like a call-in card. May found the tracks first. Deep, heavy hoof marks leading in from the southern ridge. She followed them to the edge of the creek where they vanished into water. When she told Samuel, he only nodded. "We rebuild," he said. "Then we wait." Clara stepped in front of him. "Wait for what?" "For him to come back." Liddy helped Tobias repair the fence. They worked without talking until she caught him staring at the hills too long. "You expect him to come through those trees?" "Not today," Tobias said. "But he will." "Then what?" "Then we don't let him take what ain't his." Kane came again 3 days later. This time with 2 riders. He stayed on the ridge, didn't cross the fence. Just looked down at them while they worked the fields, expression unreadable. "You'd think a man with that much land wouldn't care about a sliver," May muttered. "It ain't the land," Eli said, tightening his grip on the shovel. "It's what's on it." "What is on it?" "Us." Clara sat with Samuel that night at the kitchen table. The maps were laid out, corners curling. She traced the faded boundary lines with one finger. "You sure these hold?" Samuel didn't answer for a long time. Then he said, "They held for my father. That'll have to be enough." "It wasn't enough to keep him. He didn't fight back." "And you will?" "If I have to." The next morning, a calf turned up dead, its side split open by something too precise for an animal's teeth. Eli found it, and said nothing. Just knelt in the snow, and pulled his coat over the carcass like it deserved dignity. Later, Kane sent a message by way of a neighbor. A legal challenge, claims the barons had overstepped the line. No real weight to it, but enough to stir trouble. Enough to raise doubt. Samuel rode into town the next day, returning with a letter from the county office confirming the boundary. But confirmation didn't stop bullets. Or fires. Or cut fences. May gathered the tools into the barn, locking the doors tight. She stood with Eli by the window that night, watching the tree line. "I hate waiting," she said. "So do they. That's the edge." Liddy caught Clara sharpening the kitchen knife on the porch. Mather spoke. The steel hissed against stone. "You think he's going to force this?" Liddy asked. Clara didn't stop sharpening. He wants us to leave first. And we won't. No. That night, Cain sent a message loud enough for all to hear. A fire, set just beyond the boundary line. A stack of brush and barn scrap lit in the dark, flames licking the sky. It didn't touch their land, but it sang a warning. Tobias didn't wait for orders. He and Liddy were halfway up the ridge with buckets before Samuel called them back. The fire wouldn't spread. It wasn't meant to. Samuel stood on the edge of their land, watching the fire until it burned down to nothing but ash. When he turned to go, Clara stood waiting. "This is your land, but it's our home now too," she said. He met her eyes. "You saying that as a warning?" "No. As a promise." The next morning, they built new fences, stronger this time. Not just posts and wire, but rocks laid thick and deep, trench lines dug to hold fast against weather and man. Cain didn't show again that week. But word spread through the nearby towns: barren land was holding. The poor girls weren't packing. And the barons weren't budging. When May passed through town for seed, the storekeep offered her extra nails. No charge. "Word is you folks are building something worth keeping," he said. "We are." Clara caught Samuel on the porch the next evening, arms crossed, watching the sky like it held answers. "You think he's done?" she asked. "He's thinking. Men like Cain don't rush. They let you exhaust yourself, then they step in. And you? I'll let him wonder how far I'm willing to go." Clara nodded slowly. "Let him wonder about all of us." The wind shifted that night, warm air rolling down from the ridge. Snow melted in patches. The land held quiet. No more messages. No more rides. Just the sound of hammering, digging, and the steady rhythm of people building what no one thought they could hold on to. They didn't declare victory. Didn't call it peace. But Cain didn't come back. And sometimes, that's the only kind of wind the West ever offers. The earth broke open with the sound of steel biting soil. Clara pressed the hoe into the thawed ground, sweat already gathering at her brow despite the spring wind. Her boots sank into soft mud, but she didn't mind. Not today. Not after everything. Behind her, Liddy carried a bucket of seeds like it was something sacred. Each step careful, each handful deliberate. The rows they carved weren't straight, but they were theirs. Samuel watched from a distance, leaning on the fence rail, a blade of grass between his teeth. He didn't call out. He didn't need to. The sight of Clara working that land said more than any words could. She didn't look his way, but she knew he was there. That was enough. Inside the barn, May spread feed for the chickens, her sleeves rolled up, a stray feather stuck in her hair. Eli sat on a stool, mending a harness with slow, practiced hands. His limp hadn't gone, but he didn't favor it like before. It was part of him now, something earned, not pitted. "You could let me handle that," May said. Eli didn't look up. "I like doing it." "You like doing it wrong?" He smiled, thread between his fingers. "Depends on what kind of wrong." She tossed a handful of grain toward the hens. "You going to tell me what you're thinking?" "I was thinking about how this place didn't feel real until you started yelling at me." She shook her head, but her smile betrayed her. "You're still slow. And you're still here." Tobias sat on the porch, carving a piece of wood into something that hadn't yet revealed itself. Liddy dropped beside him, not asking, not waiting for an invitation. "You still hiding out here when the work's done?" "I ain't hiding. Just don't like celebrating nothing too early." "Who said we're celebrating?" "You're smiling." She looked at him. "So are you." He kept carving. "You think we're going to last?" She plucked the splinters from his coat sleeve. "We already did." The mail came in a worn satchel, dropped by a rider who didn't stay. Among the letters was the official county seal. Clara opened it at the kitchen table, the others quiet around her. Her eyes scanned the words once, then again. "It's settled," she said finally. "Boundaries confirmed. Water rights too." No one cheered. No one clapped. They just sat in the silence of something hard-earned. Samuel reached for his cup, took a slow sip. So, he said, we're still standing. We are, Clara said. And not because anyone let us. That night the table was full, not of food, but of people. The bread was plain, the stew simple. But the air carried something new. Not just relief. Not quite joy. Just the solid warmth of knowing the next day would be theirs. Eli tapped his cup with a knuckle. To no one waiting for permission. May raised hers. To bad land made good. Tobias lifted his without looking up. To quiet mornings. Liddy clinked hers against his. And louder nights. Clara didn't raise hers at first. She looked at Samuel, who hadn't moved. To those who didn't run, she said. Samuel finally lifted his cup. And to the ones who stayed. Later, when the lamps were out and the sky stretched wide above the house, Clara walked the edge of the field with Samuel. The stars were clearer now. The wind was softer. You still think it's too early to call it ours? She asked. He looked over the land, the fences, the barn, the home with light behind its windows. No. I think we've earned it. You think your father would have been proud? He took a breath. Don't know. But I don't care anymore. She smiled. That's new. I've got other things to care about now. She reached for his hand without thinking. He let her take it. They stood there in silence, side by side, the dirt under their feet soft and ready. In the distance, the first green shoots of wheat had begun to poke through the soil. No one would write stories about them. There would be no songs. No legends. Just a piece of land hard won. Just a house, filled with people who chose each other. Just a spring that came after a winter that tried to break them. Sometimes, that's all the West gives. And sometimes it's enough.